Let's talk. Your health and wellness podcast.
Let's Talk podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Avron Urison, and tonight we're diving into a topic that touches many lives, the impact of exercise on cancer. We're incredibly privileged to be joined by two highly respected individuals today. First, my regular panelist, entrepreneur, and passionate health advocate, Grant Austin. Welcome back, Grant. For those of you who are new to our podcast, Grant is the owner of Edge Fitness Clubs, a thriving gym brand with 11 locations across South Africa. He's built a community that empowers thousands to live healthier, stronger lives. Grant, welcome.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to be up.
Yeah, and looking forward to continue the conversation and these important conversations. And now just to welcome our very special and esteemed guest, Professor Jon Patricios. Prof. Jon Patricios, if I can just give our listeners a bit of a background to Prof. Jon Patricios, who he has been in sports medicine since 1996. He's director at Waterfall Sports Orthopedic Surgery and a professor at Wits University, leading the Wits Sport and Health Research Group. He's a global authority in sports-related concussions, serving on advisory panels for World Rugby, FIFA, UEFA, and the NFL. And he's also co-lead author of the 2023 International Consensus Statement on Concussion in Sport. With over 130 peer-reviewed publications, he's not only a researcher, but a practitioner, having worked with schools to international level athletes. Prof. Jon Patricios, and if you don't mind, I'm going to call you John because we go back a long way. We're honored to have you to join us. Thank you so much.
Everyone, such a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to let everyone in on the secret that we're old classmates, going back to the late 1980s, actually. So go back a long way, and it's a pleasure to reconnect in this way. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Thank you. And I'm so looking forward to unpacking the study that you were involved, that you've involved with. But just before we go there, John, I just want to ask you, what is the Wits Sport and Health Consortium or grouping that you're involved with? That's WISH.
So Wits University and the Faculty of Health Sciences has recognized that sport and exercise medicine and the role of exercise in health promotion has become critical. So what they've done is they've created the Wits Sport and Health Group, or WISH for short, which is a research group which looks at projects to research to elevate exercise medicine and the role of physical activity, the type of stuff that Grant does in his work to promote health. And one of the topics we're going to discuss today is its role in cancer prevention, cancer treatment, etc. But its role is so far-reaching that it really warrants a lot more attention than it's had in the past. So the role of sports medicine extends well beyond the sort of elite athlete, the Springbok rugby player, Bafana, etc. This is where exercise comes into its own, is in our daily lives. And that's the type of thing we research, and we've done a couple of high-profile research projects, and the one we're going to talk about this evening is one of them.
Great. So I think that gives a good outline and background. So let's dive straight into the study, which obviously prompted me to contact you to set up this podcast. That's the study at the center of our conversation this evening. John, can you give us a bit of background about this study that's just been published, and sort of what distinguishes this study from other studies?
Just to give the listeners a bit of background, the research study, which was published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine in January, looked at the role of physical activity and regular physical activity in particular in cancer across a range of cancers. And we looked at two outcomes. One was cancer progression, in other words, moving from an early stage cancer to a later stage cancer. And then we looked at death from that cancer and how physical activity impacted on your chances of progressing and your chances of dying from that cancer. And we're very fortunate in Wish at WIT Sport and Health. We have an excellent collaboration with Discovery Health, which is an incredible database of members. And in particular, because, as you know, they're aligned with the Vitality program, which encourages active participation in physical activity as well as other healthy endeavors, eating properly, having regular health checks, etc. So what interested us is to look at Discovery Health and their oncology database, their cancer diagnosed patients, particularly those with stage 1 cancer who've just been diagnosed with early stage cancer. And we monitored them for up to 13 years to see how their cancer progressed and how many of them died from that cancer. And we aligned that research with an analysis of their regular physical activity. Those people who are familiar with Vitality know that you regularly measure your physical activity levels through electronic devices, smart watches, phones, clocked gym memberships, etc. So it's a very powerful database, not only in its number and in its data collection, but in the fact that you have measured data for physical activity. So why that's important is most international studies that look at these things rely on self-report. So they send out a questionnaire and they ask the participant how much exercise they've done and that's quite unreliable in many respects and also difficult to measure intensity of exercise. Whereas with the Vitality database, we have access to electronic data, which is very powerful. So that was one of the distinguishing factors. The other thing, it was a collaboration between this private healthcare insurer and an academic institution, Wits University, and then another institution from overseas, from Canada, the University of Western Ontario, who we partnered with, who provided excellent international perspective for us. It was a large database by cancer standards, over 28,000. And as I mentioned, very importantly, measured physical activity data. So in many respects, this was quite a unique study, and also outside of traditional study areas, the global north. You know, most of these studies come from America, Canada, Europe, and Australia. So this was probably the first study to come from outside of there of this size. So in many respects, it was really quite a powerful study, and hence picked up by the British Journal of Sports Medicine and published, and then actually issued by them for press release, because they thought international press release of its prominence. So we're very proud of that.
No, it looks incredible. Before we jump into the results, are you saying that potentially in many respects, it's something that hasn't been done sort of as this type of study internationally before?
So the other international studies that had been done use self-reported measures of physical activity, and there's never been a study in Africa done on this sort of cohort of patients. So these are unique data, which hopefully will be useful globally. The other thing about the South African database, although Discovery as its membership draws from a certain social economic income bracket, there is much greater diversity across demographics than in traditional European or American databases. So it does add a richness to that, which we hope to explore further.
Great. So I think that's obviously put it out there, what you guys are doing. I suppose our listeners are saying, okay, so what were the findings of the study? Let me ask you that. And were you surprised by the findings?
So I suppose those people that are familiar with physical activity and its benefits, Grant will comment now because he sees it on a daily basis. Those people that exercise regularly really understand the benefits. I'll use the analogy, it's like brushing your teeth. Once you do it, you should never stop because it's part of your health routine. So I'm not surprised at the outcome, and I think that most of the researchers who are obviously dive deeply into physical activity research regularly weren't surprised by it. But Some people might, and I'll comment on one surprising aspect in a while. But what the research showed that there were significant benefits to regular physical activity, and I'll explain what that means, even at fairly low levels. So if you exercise regularly, and that is as little as 60 minutes a week, it is very little, you think about it,
Sure.
then your chances of progressing from stage 1 cancer to higher stages of cancer was 16% lower. If you exercise slightly more than that, more than 60 minutes a week, which is really also not a lot, or fairly moderate, your chances were 27% lower of progression.
Wow.
And when it came to dying from those cancers, the incidence for the low level exercises, just any exercise, basically less than 60 minutes a week even, the incidence of death from that cancer over the time that we monitored them was 27% low. For those that exercise just moderately, 60 minutes or more, the incidence of death reduced by 47%, nearly half. So the results of fairly moderate levels of physical activity on progression of cancer and outcomes, adverse outcomes, were significant. So I mentioned the surprising thing was how a little exercise goes a long way. And we know that doing more helps, and helps even more. And we can discuss that in a little bit more detail. How much is enough? I think that's a question many people ask. What's the optimal amount? But what was amazing about this study was even very modest amounts of exercise make a difference. You often hear people say, I don't have an hour to go to the gym. I didn't have time. But there's an increasing trend in the research coming through that shows that small amounts of exercise have a cumulative effect. And this sort of research sort of substantiates those findings.
John, that's huge. I mean, just to quantify for our listeners, I mean, I don't know many other effects, or say effects that you can help yourself with that can have such an impact on your mortality and morbidity. To get those types of numbers that's above 20% is actually an impact on morbidity and mortality is more significant than most
not many medications. Not many medications would do that.
Exactly.
We talk about exercise as medicine and utilizing it as an intervention and a prevention. And it's probably the most powerful tool we have. We can discuss a bit later why it's so powerful. But it's accessible. And this is just looking at one aspect, just the cancer prevention aspect, progression aspect.
So I want to dive deeper, but I'm just going to hand over to Grant now, and just for the broader impact of the study, and ask Grant, are you surprised by these numbers?
I'm very surprised by I'm not surprised that exercise contributes to great health and that kind of a thing. I'm very surprised by the numbers, and it's super impressive because it's data driven and it's hard data driven. Like you said, John, it's not a form that somebody filled in. It's actual data that's been collected from wearables and gym turnstiles and stuff like that. Something that I find super, super encouraging is, I remember 10, maybe 15 years back, if somebody had a knee replacement or a hip replacement, they would literally be told to stay in bed for 2, 3, 4 weeks, don't get out of bed kind of thing. Nowadays, virtually they want you to get off the operating table and walk back to your room because, they've realized that getting mobile again, getting active again is the best possible thing that you can do. I think that a lot of, in the past, the medical profession has been more cautious. There hadn't been enough research done into it. So the best option was if XYZ is hurting you, stop doing that kind of a thing. So there was no discussion of moderate exercises, basically completely abstaining. And I think that as we progress, the research has gotten better and better and deeper. We're all realizing now that you obviously have to exercise, but you have to do it in a way that's not going to complicate the issue or make matters worse. So that's where the trick comes in, is having people who are able to advise you on what you can do. Fortunately, even sort of light duty walking which can't pretty much do anybody any harm, is really good for you. So we find that really encouraging in the gym industry or the health and fitness industry, that people are becoming, and the medical fraternity is becoming more and more supportive of people. Actually, movement is medicine. And what you said just now, John, about people saying, I don't have the time, it is such a good saying. If you can't find time for health, you're going to have to find time for sickness. So that really is the bottom line. People have to prioritize that. Put it in your diary, make it that hour of your day. If something else wants to get in the way of that, you have an appointment, just like an appointment to see a doctor or an estate agent or a lawyer or something like that. That's your appointment for you to spend some time and invest back in your health.
I would absolutely agree with that. And, you set aside time for other health priorities. There's no better priority than physical exercise, bearing in mind the benefits that we see. So certainly it's something that everybody should incorporate into their program. And, it's all the old cliched things about taking the stairs instead of the lift and walking, further from your car to the supermarket. I mean, it does have an effect. There's no question. But I also want to emphasize the need to put aside time for physical activity, dedicated time, in other words, exercise time, because it extends beyond just the physical benefits. There are social benefits, particularly exercising in groups and in environments with other people. And then increasingly, we're realizing the mental health benefits. The influence of deviating a little bit from this topic, but I just want to emphasize that there are benefits that extend into nearly every sphere of life.
Sure. Yeah. John, can we just go back to the study here? I just want to understand something and put in perspective for our listeners, just to get to the medical side. And Grant, I'm sure you'll appreciate. You said that it has obviously an impact in early stage cancer. Are you talking there in terms of early stage cancer that hasn't been diagnosed yet, or stage 1, or that people aren't aware about? In other words, if people exercise and they've got a propensity to develop cancer, let's say they're on a stage 1 very early, without even knowing it, did this study show that will have an effect on those individuals?
It didn't look at that. These were diagnosed patients with early diagnosed stage 1 cancer. In other words, it hadn't spread. And the reason we looked at stage 1 is we didn't want the cancer to be advanced enough to have an influence on the ability to exercise. So you can imagine with latter stages of cancer, both the cancer itself and the treatment might affect their ability to exercise or their willingness to exercise. So that's why we looked at those early stage cancers. And then we took the data back a year and 2 years to look at their activity levels. So that's the other thing. Even if the cancer then advanced a bit and prevented them from exercising as much as they used to, that exercise at the exercise bank, let's put it that way, the physical activity bank that built up for a year or two before served them well through their cancer, which shows that the regularity of exercise pays dividends going forward.
Sure. Would it be reasonable to extrapolate then to say that if you have a cancer inside you, let's say, or you don't know about it, that exercise would have a similar effect on that, or can you not extrapolate that from the study?
Not from the study, but there are studies that show the benefits of exercise in cancer prevention. So again, across cancers, and some of them like breast cancer, significant, nearly 50% decrease incidence in women, in that case, that exercise regularly. Prostate cancer in men, colon cancer across the spectrum. So there are other studies that show that. This study didn't look at it, but we do know that there's a preventative benefit as well.
So that was my next question. Were you cancer specific? I know you're talking about it. In other words, was it cancer across the board or just or homing in on specific?
So we looked at cancers across the board, in particular the three most prominent: breast cancer, which was exclusively women, prostate cancer, exclusively men, and skin cancers. Those were the three. We did exclude certain cancers like the leukemias and the lymphomas because of their influence on your ability to exercise. So we excluded those from the study, but otherwise it looked at studies across a spectrum of cancer sufferers. Yeah.
Grant, in your gyms, in your experience and with your group and your trainers across the board, have you had experience of individuals with cancer coming to you for training, and what are the effects you've seen in your experience?
Yeah, so everyone, we get a whole cross section of the population into our gyms, and we obviously have had people that have got or developed cancer, because we all have cancer within us, just whether it develops in you or not. And generally, they're very sort of fearful and not sure what to do, and their first thing they want to do is like quit doing anything. And Brian, who's also a regular guest on this show, has had some of his own brushes with cancer, and he's super knowledgeable on cancer and exercise. Having been in the gym business and personal training and educating health professionals for many years now, and we'll generally turn to him for advice on that, because a lot of the time, what the people really need is reassurance. You pretty much, if you can walk into the gym, you can exercise. But what you do, there might be certain complications with different types of cancers, and Brian is a really good resource for understanding that. And I agree with Jon 100%. There's a massive mental aspect to this as well. If you contemplate that you've got this crazy thing going on inside of you, and you feel like you're fighting this battle all on your own, and you might be lying in bed at home or sitting in your couch watching TV and not getting out and anything like that, that's a terrible stifling thing on your mental outlook on life. Whereas if you're interacting with people and you're chatting to them, and perhaps other people have faced it and beat it and moved on in their lives, so you network at the gym, you chat to people, you get to understand their challenges and how they've overcome them, that kind of a thing. And it's a great place to kind of almost break free from that vicious sort of a cycle or circle that you're in with something that you're really battling to understand. So, without promoting gyms and health and fitness and that, it's a fantastic place. People need to understand that it's a welcoming place, and it's a place that can help them to get through things mentally, and also to help them with prevention and treatment of all kinds of things.
Sure. Jon, can we move on to sort of the $1 million question now, which I've had some questions come in, and individuals when I was speaking to them and saying we were going to do the show. And this is what individuals, it may seem obvious, and people say, yeah, well, it's obvious exercise is going to help you in general health and cancer prevention, but why? What's the medical science behind it that we can sort of explain to our listeners that exercise would have an impact in terms of your cancer progression?
The first thing is that we think it has an influence on the immune system. So that if you exercise regularly, you probably become sick less. So that might be colds, flus, and there's also research to show that. And it's the same sort of effect, the increase in the cells that fight cancer, like what we call the natural killer cells, the cells of the immune system that fight infection and cancer, are boosted both in terms of their number and their effectiveness. So that's the first thing. The second thing about exercise and regular physical activity in particular is that it has a stabilizing effect on the hormonal system. So for the same reason that it helps diabetics, because it stabilizes insulin and sugar levels, some cancers are hormone responsive. So for instance, breast cancers and prostate cancer. So creating a stable hormonal environment helps. The other thing is that people don't realize that the muscular system, the musculoskeletal system, skeletal muscles, the muscles you use to move, actually act as a big organ themselves as part of the endocrine system, part of the hormonal system. And they release what we call exocrines, which are hormones released from the muscles as a result of exercise that impact, like insulin does, every other organ system in the body. And so these are very powerful and reach out to all the organ systems and promote their health and well-being, to put it in a nutshell. So by moving your body and utilizing this massive system, you are helping to boost your immune system to fight all sorts of things, including cancer, and you're also stabilizing the hormonal environment.
So for you, it wasn't surprising for the result, even though you obviously didn't start out thinking you're going to, well, maybe you did with the result, but it wasn't surprising.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, you go in unbiased because you don't know what it's
Sure.
going to show. And sometimes, what it may have shown is, listen, the 60 minutes is not enough. I mean, and that would have been also a finding if it was shown that that amount of exercise wasn't enough. But as I say, even the minimally exercising individuals derived a significant benefit.
Yeah.
And the 47% reduction in death from cancers, I think, is a number that probably even surprised me. But the findings are really consistent across a number of our other studies that we've done. We've done others on during the COVID epidemic on outcomes there, hospital admissions, ICU admissions, and deaths were significantly reduced in the physically active cohort. And we've done another study on vaccine effectiveness and the improvement that comes with regular physical activity in vaccines. So, it's consistent, and we know the benefits across cardiovascular disease, diabetes, hypertension, those sort of things. So it just adds to really another layer of protection that regular physical activity can provide.
Sure. I'm going to ask you this question. Oh, sorry, Grant, go ahead.
No, I just, what I wanted to say, I mean, if you just put it into perspective with a motor vehicle, if you service your motor vehicle regularly, it'll look after you for years and years. If you start to let it decline, all kinds of problems tend to crop up. And I think it's the same with our bodies. If you don't put back in, eventually you're going to run out of runway.
Sure. So let's go on to the exercise now, because we've mentioned exercise. I know listeners say, okay, fine. What type of exercise are we talking about? Because we know there are many types of exercise. John, let's start with you, and then I'm going to go to Grant for your experience on this. But what exercise did you look at in the study, and how would you extrapolate that for people who want to take lessons out of the study in terms of what exercise they should be doing?
So the exercise we measured here was accelerometer measured exercise. So in other words, people set their watches or their phones or whatever and measured the exercise. And this is an important thing to distinguish. Physical activity really means utilizing your muscles to move the body. So that might be walking from your car to your office, for instance. Exercise is actually a strategy. It's setting aside a period of time to utilize physical activity for an end result. And then fitness becomes that end result. So that's the distinguishing definitions between physical activity, exercise, and fitness. So this actually measured exercise and measured physical activity. And it measured it across a range of physical activities. So some was just walking at a low intensity, other was higher intensity running, some was gym exercises, resistance exercises. And the point about it is that any exercise counts. It all counts. And the one thing I try and prevent myself from doing is being prescriptive about what exercise people should do, because it's up to them, really. They must find something that they enjoy. And all exercises have their benefits. What we do know from other data and the World Health Organization guidelines is that you should include a cardiovascular component that elevates your heart rate. So that would be probably above 60% of your predicted maximum. And in terms of intense exercise, that would be 80% and above your maximum. But any moderate intensity exercise where your heart rate is elevated above what it usually is counts. The other thing I will add is that increasingly we're recognizing the benefits of resistance training. And the new guidelines recommend 2 20-minute sessions a week at least of some degree of strength training. That doesn't mean you have to bench press 100 kilos. It means that you might do some sit-ups and press-ups or body weight exercises, but something that utilizes a strength component. In terms of the time frames, we show that 60 minutes and above really produces significant effects. Optimally, 300 minutes a week of moderate intensity exercise. So that's about 60%, 60 to 79% of your predicted heart rate, or 150 minutes a week of higher intensity exercise. So those are the guidelines, and those are universal, and they apply across the spectrum of health benefits.
So 60 minutes, let's just package this for our listeners. 60 minutes, if you're taking 5 days a week, let's say you're taking 2 days break, that's probably 60 minutes a
15
day.
minutes a week. It's very little. 10 or 15 minutes a day. Sorry. It's very little.
Yes.
So most of
Yes.
those people would do, say, 2 30-minute sessions a week or 3 20-minute sessions. So when we say you don't have the time, even if you're running late, doing 20-minute session provides significant benefit.
Right. Grant, your experience on this?
So I mean, in some ways, it follows the regular sort of advice we give to people just joining the gym. When people first join the gym, their fitness level is maybe not that great. Perhaps they're overweight. I agree with John 100%. One of the most important things is to find a type of exercise that someone likes. Because you're far more likely to continue with a program that you are enjoying or maybe not hating. Than one that is putting a huge strain and burden on you. Start off slow. Don't go try flat out immediately and really make yourself stiff or perhaps injure yourself. Also, obviously, with anything, cancer or any kind of let's say injuries and that kind of thing, you got to be cognizant of what their treatment might be involving. If someone's undergoing chemotherapy or radiation or something like that, that could also play a significant role in their energy levels and, their state of mind and that kind of thing. So I think that you just have to, we take it on a case-by-case basis, understand the treatment that the person's undergoing, if there's anything to be careful about with that, start them off slow, be realistic about what their expectations and your expectations are, and just, keep a really sort of an encouraging environment to keep them coming back, because you want the exercise routine to be something that they look forward to and enjoy. So, that's, I could say exactly the same thing about anybody joining a gym. Those are kind of the guidelines that you would have to get them into it slowly and to make sure that they create a habit out of it, because that's super important as well. And if you can keep them coming for the first 30 days, they tend to fall into that kind of a habit, and that becomes part of their lifestyle from there on.
And I'd like to add to what Grant said. I like this research to come off the pages of the journal. It needs to go into the gyms and onto the pavements, and the parks.
Yeah.
And one needs to use this research. So exactly what Grant said, you can take the outcomes of this and say, listen, we've got the evidence to show that even if you're doing a 15-minute session at a low intensity, you're going to derive benefits. I had a patient soon after the study was published who I was treating for knee osteoarthritis, who was at that same time in January this year diagnosed with stage 1 prostate cancer. I was able to show him the study and say, listen, the fact that you've been active all this time is in your favor, and the outcome is likely to be much better. And it really gave him a boost. It really did help him after a really very depressing diagnosis. He actually had something to hang on to and said, listen, let's keep going with this exercise. It's helped me so far, and it's likely to help me through this next battle. So we must make this, translate the knowledge into real life situations. And these are examples of doing that. And that's why this sort of forum is so good, to have the medical people coming off their pedestals and interacting with the people that do the good work on the ground and saying, listen, take this research and put it into practice. I love that.
Absolutely. So important. I'm thinking of a particular member in the club that I train in pretty much every day. And he's undergoing quite hectic chemotherapy. And he'll come in, he'll train hard, etc. He puts a lot of time and effort in, and then I won't see him for a couple of days, and he's like really sick over those days. But the minute he's not even well enough to be back in the gym, he's back in the gym and doing what he can again, and he's got such a good and positive attitude. He's going to beat this, he's putting all the time and the effort and the work. He's using multiple avenues to get on top of this, and he's just got such a great positive state of mind. So, I really admire him and respect him for that.
Sure. Grant, can I ask you, I know there's sort of a specific, and we spoke a bit about this week, in terms of someone coming in for cancer, specifically cancer exercise. There's sort of a specific methodology or some advice you'd like to give to sort of trainers or or individuals who are trying to train people who have cancer?
So everyone, I think that, obviously you can't pretend you're certainly not an oncologist or a psychologist. You're a personal trainer. You're there to train the person. Depending on the individual and depending on what sort of a treatment they're undergoing, we'd sometimes have our head of fitness or the fitness department manager in that club give the doctor a call and just have a quick chat to them, make them understand that the person is in good hands. And then I think you just take it fairly slowly. Obviously, you do need to motivate and push the person along a little bit. It can't be at low level pace all the time. So we try to, just like any other member, we try to make the person work a little bit harder each day. If you can have a 1% improvement each day over 2 weeks, you have a vast improvement kind of a thing. So that's really what we do. Take it slowly, motivate, encourage the person, and don't get them into the gym and let them do too much and wake up the next morning even sore than they were the day before.
Sure. And then I think the areas that one would like to avoid, sort of someone with cancer, which I think it would still be those high impact activities and overexertion, right?
Yes. But it depends on what you build up to. I mean, people need to listen to their own bodies, and work according to what where they feel comfortable. Like Jon said, light and moderate exercise makes a massive difference. So you got to work up through the light to the moderate and then move on from there.
Grant, what I also just want to see, I think we've lost Jon for a minute or two, so I'm hoping he's going to rejoin us.
Yep.
But what I wanted to ask you in terms of how do you, if someone comes in and says, okay, I'm going to do 60 minutes a week, or in terms of what Jon says, how would you sort of balance it between a cardio and sort of muscle and resistance training?
Well, I'm a big believer in resistance training. And what Jon was saying just now, we've chatted about this on previous podcasts and we've chatted amongst ourselves, where your muscles are basically an organ and they produce many different things for the optimal functioning of your body. So I always like to try to get people onto the resistance training, because I believe that offers the best benefits. So we would balance that with probably a warm-up on a treadmill or a bike or something like that, or maybe something that's a low impact option, as opposed to a treadmill, maybe an elliptical or a stationary bike or something like that, and then try and bring them out onto the gym floor. Depends on their preferences as well. Some people love a group environment. They might want to join a class, a yoga class, a stretching class, a step class or something like that. So it kind of all depends on the individual. Our job is to get them in, keep them motivated, and keep them coming to the gym.
And that's what really excites me about the study. There's key medical data coming through that actually says, okay, well, here we can see that exercise, and be it cardiovascular or resistant training, actually has a direct impact on your morbidity and mortality.
Yeah. Well, I think that, like I said earlier on, Avron, it's really exciting for me that the medical profession is starting to move towards movement is medicine, which it is, and encouraging people to get out there and move rather than to, take it easy, because that's the easiest bit of advice that you can give. I think also that, in the past, go back 15, 20, 25 years ago, the gym environment wasn't as professional as it is these days. There was basically a bunch of guys who used to like to throw weights around and that kind of thing. And as a doctor, I would also be nervous of sending one of my patients into a sweat house to go and pump iron. So the professionals in the gym industry, the training, the staff knowledge, and those types of things have grown in leaps and bounds. And it's a lot easier for the medical profession to take hands with the gym industry these days because there's a better understanding. We have biokineticists. Um, we have people who've studied human movement sciences and those types of things. So the overlap is really good. You have a medical professional that can talk to a uh, another medical professional or sports slash medical sort of a type person, and I think that has alleviated a lot of those don't do anything kind of a series of advice from doctors.
So, Grant, in chatting to your team, and you know, I sort of in preparation for the show, and I think John's trying to get back, but he's struggling. But we've got really the results out of the cancer study. Hopefully, he can join. But if not, let's move on and say a gentle exercise plan. And I'll tell you what sort of was put forward. And just if you can give your comments on this, if you agree that this could be a place for individuals to start if they're really not exercising. So it's sort of divided into a 7-day plan. The first day looking at flexibility, so neck rolls, seated stretches, etc. Day 2 looking at light strength. Day 3 looking at something like restorative yoga. Day 4 looking at cardio, that's gentle walking or cycling. Day 5 marked down as active recovery, so maybe just doing stuff in your garden or just something light or something part of your normal activities. Day 6 to do repeat strength training and balance work. And then a day 7 to rest and reflect and work on mindfulness. How would you, as someone starting out and saying, okay, guys, I'm not doing anything, but I want to start doing exercise, how does something like that sound?
Yeah, I think it's a good option because you need to let the person sort of slide into it. You know, if they've never been into a gym before, it's also a little bit can be a bit of an intimidating space. So if there is somebody there to guide them and hold their hand, and you know, it is always best to start off slow. You know, as we've said earlier on, you don't want the person to wake up the next morning and cough and think, oh my word, you know, I'm not even going to be able to get out of bed because now I'm sore everywhere. Let me never go back there. You want them to have appreciated the human contact, the interaction, and you know, you want the gym to be a place that they want to return to. So it's always best to take it easier to start, but people have to understand that they do have to start upping the intensity and upping the level within reason. And that's what the trainers and the gym staff are there to do, is to try and encourage them and motivate them, and also switch things up, because you know, if you do the same thing every single day, it can also get monotonous and boring. I like the fact that there was put in on day 4, whatever it was, you know, something at home, bit of gardening, walking around, and that kind of thing, because that's also food for the soul. So yeah, I agree with that outline of that exercise plan, Avron.
Great. I thought I was just saying to start off on, John, thanks. Welcome back, and nice to have you back, given your technical issues there. We were just going through some exercise plans and how individuals can start. For those people who think, okay, exercise is great, but I'm not doing anything, how can I start? And I think we've emphasized from the study that it's good to start, right? Even if you're doing a moderate amount of exercise, it's just good to start, get a strategy in place and get going and start exercising. John, just 2 other areas that you've come, now that you've come back to us, that I still wanted to tackle was, in terms of the global cancer burden, what are you finding sort of? Is it increasing the incidence, decreasing? And I know you're doing a lot of research work around this. And how do you feel that sort of, as exercise hopefully increases and people get onto around the world, how sort of that, what will the impact be?
We know that there's at least 10 million deaths from cancer a year globally. It's quite significant. The incidence is increasing for 2 reasons, possibly. One is the increased longevity of the world population. So we're living longer, so more people are, you know, suffering from cancer. And secondly, probably environmental and lifestyle habits, which we know across the globe have really declined significantly. And the lack of physical activity is part of that. So certainly increasing burden, which needs increasing attention. Increasing.
Sorry, John, I'm not hearing you that well.
Yeah, sorry, my signal's become weak. Can you hear me now?
Yes. I think there's a bit of a
Yes,
connectivity
perfect.
issue.
I think we're good now. Go ahead.
I was just saying the global burden is becoming more significant, over 10 million deaths a year globally, and increasing because of the lifespan increasing in the population. Drugs are keeping us alive. So now people are suffering from cancer, and also lifestyle choices, which are poor, nutritional choices, lack of physical activity. So any intervention is going to be beneficial and needed.
Right.
And
I
stress,
suppose what
stress
we-
as well, the stress levels in the world are rising every single day, wars all over the world, money issues, economic downturns, etc. So stress in my view is a big trigger for many different types of diseases. And if you're working out, you at least have an hour or so where you have nothing on your mind, and you're in a different environment. So I think that's all very positive as well.
And then exactly. And then, Don, I suppose coming out of the study and having shown this, and you being passionate about exercise, and Grant, you as well, one would hope to say, okay, well, this hopefully serves to educate individuals the power of exercise and what it can do, and the impact that can have globally on both morbidity and mortality from cancer.
Absolutely
Yeah,
important.
100%.
As I emphasized earlier, it's important to utilize this sort of information in everyday environments, to say to people, this sort of research is not aimed at high-level academic institutions only. This is aimed at giving people who actually perhaps often don't have access to expensive oncology treatments and a way of living a healthier life, helping to tackle a disease which is potentially a killer, and utilizing something which we know has a number of other benefits to promote health. Now, what other intervention, whether it's a pill or whether it's something that you can drink as a supplement, what else has these benefits across a spectrum, of health, in terms of everything from stabilizing your sugar, helping you lose weight, strengthening your bones, and now we know in slowing the progression of your early stage cancer. I don't think that there's anything else which has got as many powerful effects. And it comes back to this far reaching effect of exercising muscles as a system and utilizing that to its maximum effect. And unfortunately, with our modern lifestyles, we've lost that. If you think back 300,000 years, if you couldn't move, then you wouldn't have existed because you couldn't find food or you were hunted down. So
Yeah.
I think genetically we're designed to move, and we really need to utilize that and be true to our inherent physiology. Otherwise, we're doing ourselves a discredit. And with the hustle and bustle of our stressful lives, it's becoming less common, and it's unfortunate.
Exactly. And Grant, that's where you come in as you help people move. And often it has to be sort of in the gym environment because people sort of need that structured time and time out to do that, although there are many other opportunities.
I think what you said just now, John, as well, is super important. The point of doing these types of studies is to change behavior. And the way to change behavior is to get that message across to the public. So people aren't fearful when, they understand that movement is medicine. They should be exercising. They need to put some time and invest that back into their health. And certainly for us as a group, I would want to sort of get the full study and start to look at some excerpts from that and start even to use that in our clubs and potentially even in the messages that we get out to people who we're trying to attract into the gyms to start exercising, because, a 47% reduced mortality rate is insane. I mean, it's, who wouldn't want that, especially somebody who is facing something as crippling as cancer can be, both physically and emotionally and mentally. And when you see these cancer walks, you have like 15, 20,000 people come out on a big walk for cancer. And the reason is not because all 20,000 of those people or 15 to 20,000 have had cancer. It's because every single person in the entire world has been touched by cancer somewhere at some stage.
Exactly.
So we need to use those results to get the message out there and get it across, because we're trying to change behaviors. If we can change behaviors, everybody can be healthier and live a better life.
I think those are great messages.
Yeah.
Sorry, John, go for it.
Just saying what I like about what Grant has said and what we're trying to do on this podcast is take ourselves out of our silos. So stop acting just as a doctor, just as a patient, just as a gym trainer, and let's interact. So I sometimes receive a call from a trainer, who says, listen, this gentleman is a patient of yours, and with his permission, I've called you just to speak to you about what type of exercises he may or may not do. So, for Grant to pick up the phone and say, listen, this gentleman's been a regular gym goer for a while, and now he's been diagnosed with an early stage prostate cancer. What do you recommend? I've heard of this study. What do you think of exercise for him? What levels is he be exercising at? I think really completes that loop and makes the patient feel really supported. So it's something that we don't do well enough as doctors, is communicating broadly. And we need to do that and transfer the messages, as I say, off the pages of a journal and out of our research into real life. And for me, that's where the benefit starts evolving.
John, we've got a few minutes left, but I wouldn't let you go without asking this question, because you're always involved in such fascinating research that Grant and I are really interested in. Is there anything interesting or coming up, or can you tell us in terms of any other interesting studies you're getting involved in?
So this is a physical activity podcast, so let's keep to the theme. And I want to tell you that there's some really good research coming out, which is turning around what we think about exercise in certain situations. So one of those is pregnancy. There's a lot of good research coming out about the benefits of exercise in pregnancy, including resistance training. Some of that about to be published now. And then the other trend in the exercise or physical activity literature is the small bites of exercise. So high intensity bites of exercise, running up the 3 flights of stairs to get to your office. And, that sort of 2-3 minute burst of exercise activity regularly through a day is also shown to be having cumulative effects. So those are 2 areas that I think we're looking at significant benefits. And the other is the benefits of exercise in the youth. So exercising in the adolescent and pre-adolescent period, and the benefits that has, the sustained benefits to your body, for instance, bone density during the growing years will sustain you for the rest of your life. And the benefits that has going forward in terms of outcomes, health outcomes. If you exercised as a youngster, you're likely to live healthier lives as an adult. So across the spectrum, the role of regular physical activity is being shown increasingly. Whereas before we used to say, don't exercise when you're pregnant, and don't do resistance training and that sort of thing. Wow. A lot of it is being debunked. So really it's a space that is opening up in terms of the evidence to support various forms of regular exercise.
John, it sounds so interesting. And I can't wait for those studies to be published, or even if you get halfway, and bring you back on our show to talk about it, because there's a forum and we definitely want to get it out there. I just want to go to Grant, and then John will finish with you. Grant, it's been a fascinating show. I think we've learned so much. Any parting messages or words for our listeners before we end the podcast from your side?
Everyone, I think just, it's really encouraging that the medical profession now has a gym profession that is more professional, and they are able to refer people to us in confidence. Because I think go back 20-25 years ago, gyms were just sweat pits with guys, lumbering heavy iron around and that kind of thing. Now we have bios and people who've done human sports science and that kind of thing, human movement study degrees and that kind of thing. And I think that we're becoming a lot closer. So it's a lot easier for the medical profession to refer people into a system that they understand will be supportive and helpful for them. And that's really encouraging. And then just to say to John, thank you so much. I mean, I really enjoyed the last hour. Super, super interesting, super informative. And we definitely at Edge Fitness are going to use some of the information that came out of the study to inform our members and the greater public about, what what they should be doing in order to keep themselves healthy. So thank you so much for that.
Thanks, Grant. And John, from your side, any final messages, any parting thoughts for our listeners?
Just if there's someone listening who hasn't thought about incorporating exercise in their routine or knows family members or friends who aren't, just to say the research is overwhelming, that small amounts count. Start small, build on it, and you'll never regret it.
I think that's such an important message, that if you haven't exercised this with this medical data and what's coming out, you can't afford not to. Grant, thank you so much for being on our show. As always, you give such insights and ideas and input, and we appreciate it. And John, Professor Jon Patricios, it's been an absolute pleasure and such a great opportunity to have you on this podcast. Such insights. You do such amazing work. I need to just say this locally and internationally. And I think we're very proud as South Africans to have you on the international stage. And it's just an honor to have you on the show. And hopefully we can bring you on again. So thank you for the opportunity.
And I appreciate this chance to spread the message. Thanks for the work you're doing. As I say, it gets it out there, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. And thank you to our audience. Thanks to our audience for listening. And hopefully you take the lessons and get into, and tomorrow when you wake up, let's start training, let's start exercising, and let's start doing the right thing. And please share this episode with someone who needs it. Let's keep moving together for better health. And until next time on Let's Talk, take care and stay active. Cheers, everybody.
Good, guys.
Thank you.
Let's talk.